Hey, this is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. History from 1877 to present. Today we're going to talk about unit number 4, lesson number 4A. And what we did with lesson 4, American Diplomacy of the late 1800s, is we split into 2 parts because it can be a little bit tricky to kind of get through. So what we're going to do is take up unit 4, lesson 4A today, and next time that I see you, we'll do lesson 4B. Today we're going to talk about diplomacy, American diplomacy of the late 1800s, and the first thing that we're going to start with, as we always do, is we look at our unit focus question. And our unit focus question says, why did nations around the world, including the United States, seek to gain colonies around the world? Well, there's any number of different reasons why, but the biggest reason is about money. When you look at the United States of America, we're an industrial nation, which means we have a lot of products, of course, that we created, manufacturing products that we create, and because of that, we need a place to sell them. Now, in looking at it, what we're going to do, of course, is look at the do now activities. This is a journal topic. Read the primary resource excerpt provided and decide if Roosevelt made a good cause for U.S. As a police authority in the Western Hemisphere. And this is what an excerpt for the Roosevelt Corollary. It says, chronic wrongdoing may in America as elsewhere ultimately require intervention. And in the Western Hemisphere, the adherence to the Monroe Doctrine may force the United States, however reluctantly, to in flagrant cases of such wrongdoing or impotence to the exercise of an international police power. Theodore Roosevelt from his 4th annual message to Congress, December 6, 1904. What we want you to do is take a few minutes in the do now activity. Go ahead and tell us what you think that means. And at this time, we'll give you a little time to navigate there, and we'll see you in a few moments. Okay, what you should have gotten from that, of course, is that Theodore Roosevelt believes that the United States of America should be a police power. And he said it reluctantly, but he said that in the case of something wrongdoing or something that goes wrong in the Western Hemisphere, the United States of America has the responsibility of making sure that it establishes order. We are, by the way, the most powerful nation in the Western Hemisphere, so that responsibility, of course, should fall to us. What we're going to do, of course, is look at the vocabulary. We have academic vocabulary and content vocabulary. And what we'll do with that, of course, is we'll try to, address as many of these as we can. But what you should always do, of course, is look these up on your own before we, on your own, so that when we do see them, you will have some familiarity with them. Lesson focus question. Now, unlike the unit focus question, we gave you a brief explanation of what the unit focus question was about, and we'll go through in that greater detail at a later time. What we want you to do, of course, is write down the lesson focus question, and this is what's going to guide us through our lesson. First question, what effect did the likelihood of spheres of influence in China have on the United States? What effect did President Theodore Roosevelt's big stick diplomacy have on the U.S. relations with other nations? And what was President Woodrow Wilson's moral diplomacy? What we're going to do is look at American influence. The first thing is American influence in the Pacific in terms of why the United States of America, sees the Pacific as a opportunity to get involved in imperialism. Well, American interest in Asia centered around protecting American business access to trade in China. The creation of naval bases throughout the region would be vital to protect American interests. Well, when you look at the United States of America, we were late to the imperialism game, and because we were late to the imperialism game, we had to get in where we kind of fit in. And the place that we could fit in, of course, was in the Western Hemisphere, in the Western Hemisphere, but throughout Asia, specifically in China. And the one thing that China had that was so attractive is the fact that they had so many people that lived there, which means there was a great market for American products. And we want to do whatever we could, of course, to make sure that we safeguarded access to those Chinese markets. The open door policy is one of the things that we do, of course, to make sure that we have access. In 1894, China was divided into spheres of influence by European nations. Spheres of influence means that each nation, of course, had kind of carved out their little area that they wanted, of course, to trade and influence. The American government wanted Chinese trade to be safeguarded from other nations' interference, and the U.S. was afraid that if other nations gained spheres of influence in China, American business would be blocked from trade access. And that's the one thing that we didn't want, because of China having so many consumers for American products. The open door policy was created by Secretary of State John Hay and President William McKinley. Nations with spheres of influence agreed, and the U.S. was ensured trade access to China. China was even included in the agreement here. This is a situation where European nations get together and decide kind of China's fate. What we're going to also find, though, of course, is that we said the Chinese weren't consulted a great deal. They were kind of visited upon, if you will. And one of the things that happens is whenever, anybody, of course, feels like that they don't have any say, and the Chinese specifically feel like they don't have any say, there can be people, of course, that want to end that. And one of the things that the Chinese do in the late 1800s is try to get all foreigners out of China, and that happens with the Boxer Rebellion. Sometimes the Society of Harmonious Fists was the Chinese secret society that sought to repel all foreign influence in China. In what would be called the Boxer Rebellion, the Chinese attacked foreign embassies and killed foreign diplomats and Christian missionaries. The rebellion was squashed by a coalition of foreign nations and the U.S., and China ended up compensating the nations affected. So they started it, they had to pay for it. At least that's what the idea, of course, in America was. And throughout those European nations, of course, they were trying to gain those, or trying to maintain those spheres of influence. Speak softly and carry a big stick. This is Theodore Roosevelt at his finest. When you think about Theodore Roosevelt, we know of him, of course, as the story, of course, with the teddy bear. When he comes to, I think, Mississippi and hunts for a teddy bear, and he gets a hunting bear, and the guy brings a bear for him to shoot, and he's too little, and we kind of give him, or he's endeared, of course, to the American public because of his act of allowing that little bear, of course, to live. Big stick diplomacy was created by President Roosevelt in 1901. The big stick would be the U.S. Navy, which would be used to bully nations into submission, like that time when the United States bullied Colombia into allowing the Panamanians to become independent. And the only reason why we did so is because we wanted them to negotiate with them so that we could build the Panama Canal that would connect the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean and create a shortcut between the two oceans, which we felt like we needed after fighting the Spanish-American War. The Roosevelt Corollary. The Roosevelt Corollary was an addendum or an addition to the Monroe Doctrine, which gave the U.S. authority to intervene in the affairs of any nation in the Western Hemisphere to settle disputes, particularly regarding debt repayment to European nations. It was created to prevent European nations from using debt to gain further influence in Latin America. We had created the Monroe Doctrine much, much earlier, decades earlier. But we didn't, the United States of America didn't do anything, of course, to kind of enforce it because we weren't strong enough to enforce it. But after the Spanish-American War and we become such a world power, now the United States of America is in a position militarily where we can kind of defend our spheres of influence in the Western Hemisphere. Here's a cartoon of the Roosevelt Corollary. This is an extension of the Monroe Doctrine, was the Roosevelt Corollary. Roosevelt used in the Navy that war in Europe. And you'll notice the United States of America, of course, and Uncle Sam is the big rooster in the yard. The Monroe Doctrine has these, European nations where they're locked up and they're not allowed into the Western Hemisphere, which is the yard. And you have Brazil here, you have Paraguay, you have any number, Chile, you have any number of those, nations in the Western Hemisphere that the United States of America is lording over and protecting in the Western Hemisphere. Here's another cartoon of Theodore Roosevelt's big stick diplomacy, and you notice, of course, the big stick, and he's noticed, of course, as the police authority. And that, of course, is the Roosevelt Corollary at its finest. The Western Hemisphere, the shortcut to the Panama Canal, and one of the things that we said, the reason why Roosevelt was so intent about making sure that we eliminated foreign influence in the Western Hemisphere is because we wanted to create a shortcut because we recognized we needed one because of the Spanish-American War. The creation of the canal would create a shortcut through Central America for American naval and merchant ships. Difficulties of the construction of the canal, center of the isthmus was higher than sea level, so a series of locks and lakes would have to be created. The mosquitoes were a huge problem, which carried a yellow fever, and which meant that they had to be eradicated. And in 1914, the Panama Canal was completed, and the United States maintained control of the Panama Canal until December of 1999. What we're going to do is take a video break right here and give you an opportunity, of course, to navigate to the video in the video description, see the video that we have here on the difficulty in constructing of the Panama Canal. All we want you to do, of course, is view the video, and then we'll see you right back here in a few moments. Okay. You should have seen, were able to see some of those difficulties in the creation of the Panama Canal. And you can think of it, one of the things that they tell you in that video is all the thousands of lives, of course, that were lost in the construction of the canal. And it even goes into some of the details about how the United States of America and Theodore Roosevelt go about gaining control, of course, the Panama Canal. Keep in mind this about imperialism. Imperialism is about gaining influence, and gaining influence so that we could sell American products, and then have naval bases that we control in the Pacific. And we weren't new to this. We weren't the only ones doing this. This was something, of course, that was worldwide. The United States of America, as a matter of fact, was late to the party, as we told you earlier. But we do get involved, and we get involved in a big way, especially when you look at Theodore Roosevelt as President of the United States of America. This is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. history from 1877 to present. And what I always tell you, don't take my word for it, do your own research and call your own conclusions. And with that, we'll see you next time.